All right, and we're rolling. So, as you may have noticed, I have a voracious appetite for reading books. On numerous occasions, friends have asked me to recommend them books to read, and I find that kind of hard to answer for numerous reasons. While this video isn't quite that, I thought it would be a good idea to quickly go over some of the next books I see on my horizon. This doesn't mean that I'll necessarily read them in the immediate future or in the order I will present them today. Honestly, life keeps me busy, and my source of inspiration alter depending on my mood, the subject of the current project I'm working on, world events, and moments of synchronicity that lead me down a certain path. My approach towards art, whichever medium it is that it finds me when I need it most, not the other way around. Over the years, I learned simply to trust my intuition and to have it guide me forwards. So, without further ado, let's talk about 5 books that I'm very attracted to read. I'm going to start off with this list with a legendary book that I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, have heard of. And that is this one here. The Hero with a Thousand Faces. It was written by Joseph Campbell in the year 1949. So, this is a work of comparative mythology where Joseph Campbell discusses his theory of the mythological structure of the journey of the archetypal hero found in world myths. In essence, this is a book that outlines the hero's journey, that famous narrative structure where we see reproduced to infinity in all manner of mediums. Countless artists have been deeply influenced by this book. For example, it's no secret that it was a major source of influence on George Lucas for the creation of Star Wars. There are countless other examples I could give, but suffice it to say that this is truly one of the most influential books of all time. Next up, let's talk about Charles Dickens. He's regarded as one of the greatest novelists of all time. He's written well over a dozen novels, as well as numerous short stories and plays. Some of his most notable works include Great Expectation, Oliver Twist, David Copperfield, and A Christmas Carol, just to name a few. However, my first exposure to Dickens was through Hard Times. Years ago, I stumbled across this gem in a used bookstore in Ontario. Oddly enough, it's one of those rare books that I never finished reading. Don't get me wrong, it's not that I didn't like it. In fact, I remember feeling that the writing was incredibly sharp and witty, and the bleak world left a lasting bitter taste in my mouth long after I put the book back on the shelf. You know, these things happen. At the time, I felt like I wasn't ready to fully appreciate this novel at that stage of my life. Usually, I do have a pure side of me when, if I start something, I will finish it come hell or high water. But in this instance, I truly felt like I needed to put it aside and level up in life before returning to this world. And perhaps it was the wrong book for me to start with, which is why I like to give Charles Dickens another shot because I do think he's worth it. Though this time I'm going to go with A Tale of Two Cities. So yeah, it was a battle between this and Great Expectations for me, but a dear friend of mine recommended me to start with A Tale of Two Cities if I wanted to get into Charles Dickens. I have no idea what to expect reading this book, so I'm eager to find out. For the next author, I want to talk about Cormac McCarthy for a moment. I got exposed to him in my early days when I first discovered my deep passion for cinema. The films that introduced me to him were No Country for Old Men and The Road. No Country and For Old Men in particular is easily one of my favorite movies ever. But it wasn't until recent years where I actually read that book. But to be honest, it was The Road that found its way into my library as a very young teenager. It was immediately apparent back then that I was reading the work of a master writer. Truly, he is one of the greatest living American authors of our time. Ever since then, it's as if a seed of inspiration has been planted inside me, and it took almost a decade for it to begin to bloom. Therefore, in recent years, I began to build my collection of McCarthy's works. Now that I have my collection, I think it should be obvious to whomever knows his bibliography at least a bit to know which book I'm going to be starting with. And that book is going to be Blood Meridian, or The Evening Redness in the West. I've heard so much about this novel. I haven't heard anyone not refer to it as his masterpiece. I'm going in blindfolded to this experience, and I'm eager to experience this journey. It's fitting to have this desire to read more of Cormac McCarthy's works now of all time, seeing as he's finally putting out his first new work since The Road back in 2006. So it's been 16 years. And not only that, he's also putting out 2 novels this year, The Passenger and Stella Maris. What a time to be alive. Now, onto the 4th book. In a previous video, I alluded to how much of a mind-blowing experience Neuromancer was. How could I not be thirsting to read more from the mind of someone like William Gibson? That book truly is one of the all-time greatest examples in creative writing that gave birth to the cyberpunk genre. Now that I've finished reading the Sprawl trilogy, which includes Count Zero and Mona Lisa Overdrive, by the way, what great titles for books. That alone is enough to pique anyone's interest. Anyway, I can safely say that he's not a one-trick pony with Neuromancer. I feel that I'm ready to dive headfirst into another one of Gibson's eye-opening sci-fi trilogies. And this time it's going to be the Bridge trilogy. And luckily, I have all three books. I'll be starting off with Virtual Light, and I'll be finishing the trilogy with Idoru, and then finally, All Tomorrow's Parties. I can't wait to see what kind of world I'm going to be stepping into and what kind of crazy shit this guy's going to come up with. And for the last one, finally, yet another book that has been introduced to me by my love for cinema. Though curiously enough, I haven't actually watched that movie. In this case, I'm going to read the book first and then watch the movie. I'm not so much of a purist where I must do things in that order, but hey, I do have the occasion to do so, and it's fascinating for me to see the creative choices taken when adapting a novel to a screenplay. Anyway, the book in question is The English Patient, which is written by Michael Ondaatje. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And he is a Sri Lankan-born Canadian poet and novelist. Honestly, I have no idea what the book is about. Once again, I came across the book due to my knowledge of the film, which was written and directed by Anthony Minghella. The first thing that attracted me to this film is Ralph Fiennes, an actor of whom I hold him in the highest regard. He really is, I think, one of the greatest actors of all time. He's been in many of my favorite movies, and for this film in particular, he even had an Oscar nomination for acting in the leading role. Unfortunately, he didn't win, but nonetheless, we all know that this guy is one of the GOATs. And not only that, this film also earned massive praise from the critics when it came out. So it was recognized easily as one of the greatest films of the year back in 1996, pretty much unanimously. It even earned 12 Oscar nominations, which is a feat in itself, of which it actually won 9 of them, including Best Picture and Director. So yeah, clearly a behemoth of the year. And though it didn't win the award for adapted screenplay, once again, I'm hungry to learn from, first of all, the story that's present here, and to see what kind of creative choices were taken to adapt it to a screenplay that earned this kind of praise. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on some of the upcoming books that I will inevitably be reading. God knows when I'll get around to them, but eventually it will happen. I imagine I will be making this kind of video once every few months when I feel it's relevant to talk about some other works of literature. One thing is for certain, there is no shortage to choose from. By that time, I should have at least read some of the books I talked about today. And until then, I hope this video inspires you to continue reading more wonderful tales. Take care, and until next time.